everybody. Welcome to Channel 9 Live here at Ignite. And I'm Pamela Schmidt with my guest, Greg Taylor, who we have met multiple times. And we've had multiple conversations. But this is the first time we're actually sitting with each other and we're talking and we're not screaming.
No, it's normally in a bar or one of the parties, and I can barely hear what's being said. So it's great to sit and have a chat for once.
So what do you do, Greg?
I'm the Director of Product Marketing for Exchange Server and Exchange Online, but only recently moved into that role. I've been at Microsoft 15 years in consulting, and I ran the MCM Ranger program for Exchange, and then I moved into the engineering team, and I spent the last few years working in engineering and customer experience, building features. And then I realized I was too old and I couldn't remember all the technical details, so I moved into a marketing role. But where I get the chance to just go and talk about Exchange and meet our customers, and that's the bit I really love about the job, to be honest.
Well, you know you're sitting with Exchange Goddess.
I know.
So I'm going to ask some Exchange questions.
Yeah, that's fine. And I knew your Twitter account, or followed your Twitter account before we met, so it's great to meet you.
So first question.
Yeah.
I've run Exchange virtualized using Flash.
Okay.
And I hear Exchange 2019 has something to do with Flash. Can we talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So one thing we announced yesterday, in fact, we announced it back in the preview blog, that Exchange, we've started using a tiered storage model. What happened was we realized over the last few years that the work over the last 10 or 12 years the engineering team have done to reduce the I/O requirements, we were using this cheap low-cost storage, we were preaching cheap low-cost storage. And what's been happening is disks have been getting bigger and bigger, mailboxes getting bigger and bigger, but the latency wasn't coming down. So more data on a disk, but the same latency makes it really hard to give a good user experience. So we figured in Exchange Online we needed a way to get access to the small amounts of data that really affect a user experience. And that's things like search results and login and folder changes and that kind of stuff. So what we do is we have a model where we have both slow spinning drives and flash drives, SSD, and we store 5 to 6% of the data on the SSD, the data that's most important for a best user experience. So what happens then is you have both these disk types in an Exchange box, and Exchange knows when it tries to go get the data to service a user request, it'll either pull it from the flash drive, which is ultra fast, or if it's not there, it will pull it off the slow spinning disk.
Okay, so is this during the installation where the Exchange admin is installing Exchange, or it's just knows by magic?
Right, great question, right? So this requires planning, some thought.
Okay.
So this new technology, we call it the Metacache database, MCDB. You need to think about MCDB during initial architecture and deployment of a DAG. This is not something you can add to an existing DAG in a supportable way. So you plan for it, and you build it when you build the DAG. All the members of the DAG need to be equally configured. We provide the scripts and the commandlets and all of that stuff for building it. And then Exchange handles it from there. You can't actually control the data we put on the disk.
Oh, okay.
There are no knobs to turn and configuration choices. Exchange knows how to do it, and we learn that from Exchange Online. And that's the deployment that you get. So Exchange does it for you.
So it's sort of like you've locked the admins out from tinkering too much.
Well, we've locked them out from breaking something that we know works really well, right? So in Exchange Online, this is where the technology's proven out.
Yes.
And so Exchange Online runs like this now. We know what the right settings are, and honestly, if we need to adjust them, if we feel like there are changes based on customer feedback, then we'll update our code. But it's not really something we think people need to tinker with. It should just work.
Another hot item, Server Core.
Yes.
And I think I just heard Jeff Woosley say he was Snover saying, "Hey, we're talking about Exchange on Server Core." What is that all about? That's pretty exciting.
The Windows team are really happy about this, and we are too. Right? This has been a ton of work in collaboration, Exchange and Windows to run on Server Core. So we're only supporting Windows Server 2019 as the OS for Exchange 2019, and we want people to run on Server Core. And the reason for that, primarily, in one word, it's security. Right? Server Core is the most secure way of running Windows. You don't need a browser on an Exchange server. You don't need the fax software on Exchange Server, right? You don't need that. So let's take it off the box to make it more secure. But by taking off all those unnecessary services that you never need for Exchange, we're also releasing up processor and memory for running Exchange. So actually, it benefits us from a performance perspective, and it increases the security.
Well, I also saw that you've increased hardware requirements, or not increased hardware requirements, but increased the limits. So is that part of being with Server Core?
So it's a combination of a couple of things.
Okay.
And I know there was a little, there were two things. We've raised the maximum amount of RAM we support in the box to 256 gig, and the core count up to 48. But
Okay.
we've also raised the minimum recommended to 128, which I know a few
Wow.
people, right. And there's a reason for that. And we didn't get into it yesterday because we were trying to cover so much material. But it really comes down to the change in garbage collection in .NET that we were talking about
Okay.
yesterday. And the changes that we made to that whole configuration that the Exchange uses in .NET really only become beneficial and kick in if you have 100 gig of memory on the box.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean that you can't run Exchange unless you put 128 gig of RAM in the box. But we think that's the sweet spot to get the maximum performance out of the improvements that we made.
So are you telling customers that they should refreshing their hardware?
Well,
Or is that a consideration for 2019?
but I think that's a consideration every time anyone deploys a new version of Exchange, right? I mean,
True.
you know,
Unless you're virtualized.
unless you virtualize,
So we should probably get on that topic because
we should.
I
'Cause you
love
that.
virtualization.
So I mean, on the point though of, you know, it's kind of interesting. Most customers, the large enterprises, they've always been upset by how low our maximum limits were, right? Their standard SKU was much larger for physical boxes.
Yes.
So it's kind of interesting. I think most large enterprise customers would be happy with this. The virtualization piece for MCDB, I think where that's most interesting to think about for a second is how do you do MCDB? How do you add SSD flash drives to a virtual deployment? Now, you're the expert, and it can be done, right?
Yes, it can be, but it is a little bit more complicated if you're splitting off your disk. So you do have to plan out disk alignment
Sure. So
with any virtualization.
and with any
Yeah.
kind of Exchange deployment, right? There's an awful lot of planning and thought that needs to go into it. The preferred architecture is going to be updated to include
I was just going to ask that
MCDB
question.
guidance, right? So we've got that covered. The one interesting wrinkle, I think there's one thing that's particularly interesting, a scenario, which is what if you virtualize on a flash-based array, or even if you have physical with a flash-based array at the back? The question should be, do you need this MCDB SSD SAN thing, or this flash drive thing we're doing? And the answer is no.
Hear that, everybody? You don't need it if you're all flash.
If you're all flash and you've got the cache to go
Yeah.
all flash, right? Then the benefits of adding these drives to the deployment are kind of negated because everything's super fast. So
Yeah.
it's really for DAS-based deployments where we want to additionally help increase the user experience, and that's primarily what it's for.
So we kind of touched the preferred architecture. You're
Yep.
going to be updating it. What about the storage calculator, which, you know, as an Exchange admin, I did use it, and I know plenty of others have relied on that for their Exchange deployment.
Yeah, so that's something else we're working on at the moment, trying to figure out where the MCDB piece fits into that. Because now we talk about the fact that, you know, for some deployments you might not want to use MCDB.
Yeah.
MCDB is optional, right? And so it just adds some complexity to the calculations, but that's something we're working on as well.
And let's talk about the client application Outlook.
Yep.
From a supported standpoint, I know there are some organizations that still run Outlook 2010.
Yes.
I even think there might be 2007 out there. I hope not.
Probably my mother.
So what's going to be supported, and then
Okay.
we should probably talk about domain and forest functional levels as well.
Okay. So no change from previous policy, if you like, which is N-2. So we will support down to Outlook 2013, 16, and 2019. I'll tell you now, 2010 Outlook works. it will connect. We're not blocking it. We have no plan to actively block it, but it isn't technically a supported client. So it's possible it might stop working. And if it does, we're not going to fix it. Okay? So that's the primary thing there.
Okay. And so, oh my God. What do we have here?
Oh, Squeaky. When did you show up, Squeaky?
Squeaks.
Hey, that wasn't fake. Right.
What have you been up to, Squeaks?
Squeaky Lobster.
Where can our attendees see more of Squeaky the Lobster?
So Squeaky Lobster, and should we explain who Squeaky Lobster is for
Yeah, we
anyone who
probably
doesn't?
should for those that don't know.
All right. So Squeaky Lobster, who turns 21 this week. So Squeaky Lobster is this I don't know, exchange legend. One of the exchange developers, one of the storage or ESE database engine devs, created a registry key in Exchange called Squeaky Lobster. When you create a key called Squeaky Lobster, you set it to 1, you turned on advanced database debugging, logging. And he did it to try and impress a girl that he had a bit of a crush on.
Oh, wow.
So that's the original Squeaky Lobster. I actually went to the dev's office last week and I picked up the original Squeaky Lobster. He looks remarkably well for a lobster that's
Still
21
handsome.
years old. I don't think he gets out a lot. But Squeaky's going to be around all week. He's appeared in a few places. He's generally with me. And if you find me and want a picture with Squeaky Lobster, I'm happy to do that. But tomorrow afternoon, the timing and the coincidence of this is just incredible. 21 years ago tomorrow, Wednesday, at 2:15 p.m. local time here, is 21 years to the second and minute since that code was checked in.
Wow. Well, happy birthday, Squeaky,
So
tomorrow.
having a birthday party for Squeaky with ice cream tomorrow in the community central.
Awesome. I will be there. And thank you, Greg, for joining me for our first real conversation
Yeah, terrific.
with Channel 9 Live here at Ignite.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.